My name is Alara, and for as long as I can remember, my life has been a quiet melody played in a minor key. I was raised in a small, book-filled apartment overlooking the misty canals of the city's older district by a mother who taught me the value of observation and the quiet strength of watercolor paints. I learned to find beauty in subtlety, in the gentle gradient of a twilight sky, in the hushed reverence of a library. I grew up believing that the purest love was like that, too not a grand, cinematic declaration, but a steady, understated presence. It was this belief that led me to Liam. Liam, with his gentle eyes and a smile that seemed to understand my quiet world. He was a scion of Oakhaven's old guard, the Vance family, a name synonymous with heritage homes and discreet wealth. When he chose me, a soft-spoken artist, over the polished, blue-blooded women of his circle, it felt like a validation of everything I held dear. It felt like love. We married on a crisp autumn day, the air smelling of wood smoke and damp earth. Our home, a charming Victorian house on a street lined with ancient oaks, was a haven I filled with light, canvases, and the scent of baking bread. For a few years, the melody of my life swelled into a hopeful, harmonious chord. Then came the fragile hope of a child, a hope that blossomed and then, 3 months ago, withered away in the sterile, silent corridors of a hospital. The loss hollowed me out, leaving an echoing silence where joy had been. It took my weight, my sleep, and the soft focus of my happiness. In its place, a fine, gray mist settled over my days. Liam's mother, Beatrice, a woman whose grace was as sharp and cold as polished steel, insisted it was time to turn the page. She decided a family dinner was in order, a gathering to formally close that painful chapter. And so, I found myself seated at her long, mahogany dining table, the weight of a dozen expectant eyes upon me. The room was suffocatingly elegant, filled with the scent of lilies and beeswax. The clinking of heavy silver against porcelain was the only sound punctuating the strained silence. Liam sat beside me, his hand resting on my knee, a gesture that should have been comforting but felt rehearsed, a piece of theater for his family. Across the table, his father, a stoic patriarch, carved the roast with grim precision. His brothers and their wives murmured pleasantries. And 3 seats away, nestled between Liam's brother and his wife, was Chloe, his ex-girlfriend. Her presence was explained away as a simple friendly gesture. She was in town, and the Vances were so fond of her. She shone under the chandelier's light, her laughter bright and easy, her hand brushing Liam's arm with a familiarity that sent a shard of ice through my heart. My own mother, Sophia, sat near the end of the table, her face a mask of polite composure, but her eyes, when they met mine, were filled with a fierce, protective light. The first course had been served, a delicate, creamy soup. I was about to take a bite when my phone buzzed in my lap. I glanced at the screen discreetly. "Don't eat. Just trust me." It was from my mom. My stomach, already a tight knot of grief and anxiety, clenched instantly. My husband, wearing a plastic smile, raised his glass. "Please enjoy." I didn't know what was happening yet, but I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that something was very, very wrong. This dinner wasn't about healing. It was a performance, and I was beginning to suspect I was the unwitting sacrifice. That message from my mother turned the chandelier's glow into an interrogation lamp. Every eye at the table seemed to be on me, waiting for me to lift the silver spoon to my lips. Chloe was now deep in conversation with Liam, her head tilted, her voice a low murmur that was both intimate and exclusionary. She recounted a story from their university days, a shared memory that I had no part in, and Liam laughed, a genuine, unburdened sound I hadn't heard from him in months. It felt like a stone dropping into the hollow space inside me. I looked at Beatrice, my mother-in-law. She presided over the table with the serene authority of a queen, her smile a masterpiece of benevolent condescension. She was the one who had visited me in the hospital, her hugs feeling like a cage, her words of comfort laced with insidious blame. "These things happen when one is delicate," she had said, her eyes scanning my frail form with something akin to disappointment. She had never truly approved of Liam's choice of my quiet nature, my artistic sensibilities, which she viewed as a lack of fortitude. I was not, in her eyes, Vance material. And now, as she watched me, her gaze held a triumphant gleam. My mother caught my eye again and gave a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of her head. Then she mouthed the words, her lips barely moving. "There's something in your plate." My blood ran cold. I saw it then, a flashback to a few minutes earlier. Beatrice, carrying my soup bowl from the kitchen, had paused. With her back to most of the room, she had fussed with the garnish, her fingers lingering over the bowl for just a second too long. At the time, it seemed like nothing. Now, it was everything. The woman who whispered that I wasn't strong enough to carry her grandchild, the woman who saw me as a temporary fixture in her son's life, had done something to my food. The thought was so monstrous, so utterly divorced from the civilized tableau around me, that my mind recoiled. But my gut, an instinct I had learned to trust from my quiet, observant mother, knew it was true. Panic fluttered in my chest like a trapped bird. I wanted to stand up, to scream, to shatter the suffocating politeness of this room. But I was frozen, pinned by their expectations. So I faked a smile, a trembling imitation of normalcy. I lifted my spoon, stirred the soup, and brought it close to my lips, pretending to savor the aroma. I watched as everyone else began to eat, their conversations resuming their placid flow. I needed proof. My mind, clouded for months by grief, suddenly sharpened with a cold, desperate clarity. I discreetly positioned my phone on the table, propping it against a water glass, the lens peeking out between a crystal salt shaker and a floral arrangement. I started a video recording, the red dot a tiny, secret beacon of rebellion. While Chloe regaled the table with another anecdote, I pretended a sudden wave of nausea. I pressed a hand to my forehead, my face pale enough from months of stress that the performance was entirely convincing. "I'm so sorry," I murmured, my voice trembling. I don't feel well." Liam's concern was immediate but shallow. "Alara, are you all right?" "I just need a moment," I whispered, pushing my chair back. As I stood, I fumbled with my napkin, letting it fall over the side of my soup bowl. In one swift, clumsy-looking motion, I scooped a small portion of the soup into the napkin, clenched it in my fist, and hurried from the room. In the opulent, marble-clad guest bathroom, my reflection was a stranger pale, haunted woman with wide, terrified eyes. I wrapped the soiled napkin in layers of tissue and shoved it deep into my handbag. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silent, heavy ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. The drive home was a blur of streetlights seen through a film of unshed tears. My mother drove my car, her presence beside me a solid, comforting anchor in a world that had just tilted off its axis. She didn't speak, but her hand found mine and held it tightly. The unspoken understanding that flowed between us was more potent than any words. It wasn't just about the soup. It was about everything that had led to this moment, the thousand tiny cuts, the subtle dismissals, the slow, creeping realization that the family I had married into saw me not as a daughter, but as an obstacle. Liam arrived home hours later, smelling of wine and Chloe's perfume. He found me in bed, pretending to be asleep. He was quiet, undressing in the dark, and slid into bed without touching me. The space between us felt like a chasm, cold and infinite. That night, sleep was an impossibility. The house was silent, filled with the ghosts of what I thought my life was. Fueled by a cold, quiet fury I didn't know I possessed, I slipped out of bed and went to Liam's study. His laptop was open on the desk. I had never invaded his privacy before. Our trust had been, I thought, the bedrock of our marriage. Now, I saw that trust was a luxury I could no longer afford. His email was still logged in. My hands trembled as I typed Chloe's name into the search bar. The results flooded the screen, a timeline of betrayal that mirrored my own suffering. There were emails and messages stretching back months, their frequency increasing during my most difficult days of pregnancy, their tone growing more intimate during my hospital stay. They spoke of concerts, of dinners, of a future that clearly did not include me. One line, written by Liam just a week after I had lost our baby, seared itself into my mind. She'll give up soon. She's not built for this life. Then we can finally be done with the pretense. I didn't cry. The pain was too deep, too cold for tears. It was a stillness, a profound and terrifying clarity. This wasn't a marriage in crisis. It was a calculated, long-term demolition of my life. I sat there in the pre-dawn stillness, the screen's glow illuminating my face, and I felt a shift inside me. The soft, watercolor artist was gone. In her place was someone else, someone forged in the crucible of grief and betrayal. I opened a new document on my own laptop and began to write. Name by name. Action by action. This wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a game of survival. And I was about to change the rules. The next morning, the world looked different. The soft, misty light of Oakhaven seemed to seep through the windows with a new, melancholic weight. I moved through my home, our home, with the quiet deliberation of a ghost, the echo of Liam's words, "She'll give up soon," a constant, chilling whisper in my mind. The betrayal was a physical presence, a cold spot in every room. I knew I couldn't fight this alone. The Vances were a fortress, their walls built with money, influence, and generations of unshakable self-assurance. I was an outsider, an artist with a gentle heart they had mistaken for a fragile one. My first call was not to a friend or even my mother, but to a name I'd found tucked away in a legal services directory online, Anya Sharma, a solicitor specializing in domestic disputes, known for her discretion and tenacity. When I met her in her small, book-lined office downtown, away from the Vance family's sphere of influence, I felt a flicker of hope. Anya was a calm, intelligent woman with kind eyes that saw past my trembling hands to the steel I was slowly discovering in my spine. I told her everything, my voice low and steady, from the soupy dinner to the late-night emails. I handed her the small, sealed plastic bag containing the now congealed sample from my plate. "I'll have this sent for analysis immediately," she said, her expression serious. "But, Alara, based on what you've told me, I need you to understand something. This may be more than a marital issue. What you're describing, it has a pattern." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I have encountered the Vance family in a professional capacity before. You need to be exceptionally careful. Don't eat anything you don't prepare yourself. Don't accept any drinks. Be vigilant." Her words, meant to be a warning, were a terrifying confirmation. This wasn't a one-time act of cruelty. It was a strategy. My blood ran cold. Was my miscarriage? Could they have? My mind refused to complete the thought, but the seed of a terrible suspicion was planted. Over the next week, I lived in a state of hyper-awareness. I feigned lingering illness, subsisting on sealed foods and bottled water I kept hidden in my art studio. Beatrice, my mother-in-law, became a frequent visitor, her face a mask of concern. She would arrive unannounced with freshly baked scones or a flask of restorative herbal tea. "To build up your strength, my dear," she would say, her voice as smooth as silk. "You've been so dreadfully pale." I would thank her, my smile feeling like a crack in my face, and watch her leave, her car disappearing down our Oakline street. Then I would pour the tea down the drain and crumble the scones into the garden for the birds. My home no longer felt like a sanctuary. It was a stage, and I was playing the part of the frail, grieving wife while secretly documenting every move they made. Following Anya's advice, I purchased several small, high-quality hidden cameras. Placing them felt like a profound violation of my own life, of the home I had so lovingly created. I hid one in a bookshelf in the living room, another in a pot of ferns overlooking the kitchen, and one in our bedroom, tucked into a decorative vase. The act of it made me feel sick, but the fear of what was happening was greater than my own sense of trespass. One afternoon, Beatrice arrived with a box of exquisite macarons and insisted on making me tea. "You just sit, darling. Let me take care of you." I let her. From my vantage point in the living room, I watched her in the kitchen. She moved with her usual unflappable grace, boiling the water, selecting a cup, her back to the hidden camera on the fern-covered shelf. As she stirred the tea, her movements were calm, almost casual. She glanced towards the living room to see if I was watching. Then, with a swift, subtle movement, she took a small vial from her handbag, uncapped it, and tipped its contents into the mug. It was a gesture so practiced, so devoid of hesitation, that it was clear this was not the first time. My breath caught in my throat. I had suspected it, feared it, but seeing it was different. It was a physical blow. The camera's unblinking eye had captured the truth. I saved the video file, my hands shaking so badly I could barely control the mouse. I sent it to Anya immediately. Her reply came within minutes. "We have enough. It's time for you to leave that house." That same evening, Anya called with the preliminary results from the lab analysis of the soup. "It's a mixture of several compounds," she explained, her voice grave. "Individually, they're mostly unregulated herbal extracts. But combined and administered over time, they're known to cause dizziness, cognitive fog, short-term memory loss, and profound fatigue. It's not a poison that would show up on a standard toxicology screen. It's designed to mimic the symptoms of severe depression or chronic grief. They weren't trying to kill you, Alara. They were trying to make you disappear into yourself. They were trying to make you seem unstable." My world tilted. The weeks of feeling weak, dizzy, forgetful, I had attributed it all to my grief, just as they had intended. "She's so emotional," Liam would say with a sigh. "The loss has hit her very hard." Beatrice would nod sympathetically, patting my hand. They were not just watching me break, they were orchestrating it. This was no longer about revenge. This was about survival. I devised a plan. I called Liam, my voice cracking with fabricated distress, and told him my mother had suffered a terrible fall and had broken her wrist. I had to go and care for her indefinitely. His relief was palpable, thinly veiled by performative concern. "Of course, darling. Take all the time you need. It might be good for you to have a change of scenery." I packed a single bag, taking my laptop, the hard drives with the video evidence, and the small portfolio of my most cherished watercolor painting the quiet pieces of myself they hadn't yet managed to erase. As I walked out of my home, the place I had filled with so much love and hope, I didn't look back. I was in exile from my own life, but for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of power. From the safety of my mother's small, sunlit apartment, I logged into the live feed from the cameras in my house. The first night, I watched as Liam came home, not alone. Chloe was with him. I watched as she kicked off her shoes and curled up on my sofa as if she had been living there for years. They opened a bottle of wine from the cellar, a special vintage we had been saving for our anniversary. They laughed, and the sound echoed through the empty house, a haunting confirmation of all my fears. The next day, Beatrice arrived. I watched her walk through my home, her eyes sweeping over my belongings with a proprietary air. She went into my art studio, a sacred space she had always dismissed as my little hobby room. She picked up one of my brushes, her expression one of faint disdain, and set it down again. She and Chloe spoke in low, conspiratorial tones in the kitchen, their heads bent together. I watched them, a silent, invisible observer of my own life's dismantling. The pain was a sharp, physical ache in my chest, but it was no longer just pain. It was fuel. From my mother's spare room, surrounded by the quiet comfort of her books and the familiar scent of jasmine tea, I began to fight back. My revenge would not be loud or explosive. It would be like me, quiet, meticulous, and unyielding. I began to assemble a digital dossier, a fortress of evidence built from video clips, audio files, screenshots of Liam's emails, and copies of financial statements I found on our shared drive showing significant money transfers from Liam to Chloe. My first move was an anonymous, carefully worded email to the head of Human Resources at Vance & Sons, Liam's family firm. I attached a single, damning financial record showing a large payment to Chloe labeled as a consulting fee, for a date when she was supposedly just a friendly visitor. A few days later, a friend who worked in the financial district told me that Liam Vance had been quietly placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. He would think it was a jealous colleague, a corporate rival. He would never suspect it came from the quiet, watercolor artist he had so casually discarded. Next, I turned my attention to Beatrice. I drafted another anonymous letter, this time to the Ethics Committee of the Sterling Clinic, where she reigned as a respected administrator. I detailed her behavior, her use of her position to procure the herbal compounds, and attached the chilling video of her spiking my tea. I knew her immaculate reputation was her most prized possession. I was about to tarnish it, slowly and irrevocably. One by one, the foundations of their perfect world began to crack. And they had no idea the earthquake was coming from me. A week after I left, my sister-in-law, Maya, called me. She was Liam's younger sister, a gentle soul who had always seemed out of place in the cold and vicious Vance dynasty. She had never been close to her mother and had always treated me with a warmth that felt genuine. "I'm moving out of state, Alara," she said, her voice heavy. "I can't be around them anymore. But before I go, there's something you need to have." We met at a quiet cafe on the far side of the city. She slid a small flash drive across the table. "I recorded this at a family lunch a few weeks ago," she whispered, her eyes full of a sad resignation. "I don't know why I did it. I just had a feeling." That night, I listened to the audio file. It was a recording of Liam, Beatrice, and Chloe talking. Their voices were relaxed, confident, certain I was out of the picture. And then I heard Liam's voice, colder than I had ever known it, say, "She's more useful to us compliant and alive." But if she continues to be an obstacle, the sentence hung in the air, unfinished but pregnant with menace. Chloe laughed, a high, tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. That was the last piece of my doubt. I forwarded the audio file to Anya Sharma. Her response was swift. "We are escalating this. I'm meeting with the district attorney's office tomorrow. Stay quiet, Alara. Stay invisible. Let the evidence speak for you." But staying quiet was no longer enough. I needed the truth to have a voice beyond a courtroom. I created an encrypted file containing edited audio clips, damning email excerpts, and a transcript of Beatrice's actions. I posted it, completely anonymously, to a local Oakhaven community forum, a place where gossip and news spread like wildfire. The caption was simple: "Some families have secrets. The Vances have a strategy." Within an hour, the post was viral. The whispers had begun. And I, watching from the quiet solitude of my mother's apartment, knew that their carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down. That night, Liam called me for the first time in a week. His voice was strained, tight with a panic he was trying to conceal. "Alara? Do you know anything about these rumors that are flying around?" I took a deep breath, the scent of my mother's night-blooming jasmine filling the air. "No, Liam," I said, my voice calm and clear. "I have no idea. But perhaps it's just the universe finally putting everyone in their rightful place." I ended the call, the silence that followed feeling like the first note of a victory march. The days that followed were a cascade of consequences. The digital whispers grew into a roar that the Vances could no longer ignore. But the deepest cut, the one that revealed the true, chilling depth of their machinations, came from a place I never expected. Anya called me, her voice uncharacteristically shaken. "Alara, we've received a document from an anonymous source. It's a medical file. It's in your name." She emailed it to me. I opened the file and my world, which had already been shattered, fractured into a million unrecognizable pieces. It was a psychiatric evaluation from a private clinic I had never heard of. It was dated 7 years ago, long before I had even met Liam. It detailed a brief, voluntary admission for emotional instability and adjustment disorder. My name, my date of birth, my old address, it was all correct. And at the bottom of the page, under the typed name of the attending physician, was a signature. A signature I recognized with a jolt of ice-cold dread. Dr. B. Vance. Beatrice's full name, from before she dropped her professional title to become a full-time administrator and society matriarch. How was this possible? I had never been to that clinic. I had never been treated by Beatrice. My mind raced, trying to grasp the implications. This wasn't a recent plot, it was a long game, a trap laid years before I had even stepped into it. I called my mother, my voice a strangled whisper. I told her about the file. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line, and then a deep, shuddering sigh. "Oh, Alara," she said, her voice thick with regret. "There's something I never told you. I thought I was protecting you." She explained that 7 years ago, after a traumatic car accident that had left me with physical injuries and a period of profound emotional distress, I had struggled badly. I had memory gaps from that time, months that were a hazy, painful blur. A family friend, she said, had recommended a doctor for a brief, private wellness retreat. A discreet place to recover. The doctor was a well-respected family acquaintance of a distant cousin. Her name, my mother admitted, was Beatrice Vance. "I trusted her, honey," my mother wept. "She was so kind, so reassuring. She said it was just a precaution to help you process the trauma. After you came home, you seemed so much better, and we never spoke of it again." The clinic handled everything. There were no bills, no follow-up reports. It was all erased. Erased. The word hung in the air between us. My past had been rewritten without my knowledge. I looked back at the file on my screen, my eyes scanning the fine print. There, in a small, typed annotation at the bottom, was an acronym I didn't understand, AP. I typed it into a search engine. The results made my heart stop. Assessment of Parental Eligibility. This file wasn't just a record of a past trauma. It was a weapon, forged 7 years ago, designed to paint me as psychologically unfit to be a mother. They hadn't just tried to poison me in the present, they had poisoned my past, creating a narrative that could be used to discredit me, to take a child from me, to erase me completely. The pieces slammed into place with brutal clarity. My marriage wasn't a love story that had soured. It was an acquisition. Liam hadn't chosen me in spite of my quiet nature. He had chosen me because of it, because his mother had identified my past vulnerability and seen an opportunity. I was the perfect candidate for a wife who could be controlled and, if necessary, removed. This was no longer a family drama. It was a conspiracy of breathtaking cruelty. I forwarded the file and my mother's story to Anya, who was silent for a long moment after reading it. "Alara," she said finally, her voice steely with anger. "If she used her professional position to create or manipulate a psychiatric file to be used against you later, that is a serious federal crime. This case just went far beyond a domestic dispute." The scale of it was dizzying, but my fear was being eclipsed by a cold, righteous anger. This was not just about me anymore. It was about the sanctity of a person's mind, their history, their truth. Just as I was absorbing this new reality, an email notification popped up on my screen. The sender was anonymous. The subject line was blank. The message contained a single sentence. "I'm a journalist, and I've been investigating Beatrice Vance for years. I think we need to talk." Her name was Sarah Chin, and her voice over the phone was steady and sharp. She explained that she was an investigative reporter who specialized in medical ethics. Beatrice Vance's name had appeared on her radar years ago, always on the periphery of suspicious cases, but never directly implicated. "She has a pattern," Sarah said, her words echoing Anya's. "She targets emotionally vulnerable women, often during contentious divorces, custody battles, or inheritance disputes. She uses her credentials and connections to create a medical narrative that paints the woman as unstable, unreliable. Your case, Alara, with this falsified historical file, it's the most concrete proof I've ever seen. You're not the first victim. But with your help, you could be the last." She asked if I would be willing to share my evidence for an exposé. Not just for my own justice, but for all the other women whose lives Beatrice had systematically dismantled. I thought of the ghost woman in the mirror, the one they had tried to create. I thought of the child I had lost. And I thought of the quiet, watercolor artist I used to be. I owed it to all of them to see this through. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and firm. "Use it all." I sent her everything: the videos, the audio files, the emails, the financial records, and the falsified medical file from 7 years ago. The story was no longer a collection of whispers on a local forum. It was about to become a headline. The chaos on their end was palpable. Liam's administrative leave became a formal suspension. Chloe was officially subpoenaed as part of the clinic's internal investigation into misappropriated funds. And Beatrice Vance, the untouchable queen of Oakhaven society, vanished. Her phone was disconnected. Her colleagues at the clinic hadn't seen her. She was in hiding, waiting for the storm to hit, having no idea that I was not the storm, but the unshakable ground it was breaking upon. Anya called me in for an official deposition with the district attorney. I walked into the formal, wood-paneled room and laid out my story, piece by horrifying piece. I presented the documents, the recordings, the timeline of manipulation. The room was silent, the prosecutors listening with grim focus. When I finished by presenting the medical file and said the name Beatrice Vance, one of the senior attorneys looked at his colleague. "That name has come up before," he said. "Always as a whisper. Never with proof like this." He looked at me. "That's about to change." As I left the courthouse, the city air felt different, lighter. A weight had been lifted. Tucked under the windshield wiper of my car was a plain white envelope. Inside was a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age, showing a photo of a much younger Beatrice, smiling, standing next to another doctor at a charity gala. On the back, in faint, handwritten script, were 4 words: "She never works alone." It wasn't a threat. It felt like a clue, another piece of the puzzle delivered by a fellow ghost from Beatrice's past. My fight, I was beginning to realize, had allies I didn't even know I had. My personal tragedy was becoming a collective reckoning, more powerful and far-reaching than I could have ever imagined. The final act was in motion, and none of them would see it coming until it was too late. 3 days later, Sarah Chen's exposé went live. The headline was stark and damning: "Respected clinic administrator and society figure implicated in scheme to medically discredit women." My name was kept anonymous, referred to only as a recent victim, but the details were so specific that anyone who knew the Vances knew the story was about me, about us. The article spread through Oakhaven and then to national news outlets like a shockwave. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for the Vances. The Sterling Clinic issued a public statement, suspending Beatrice's credentials and launching a full-scale external audit. Vance and Sons forced Liam to resign, severing ties to avoid further reputational damage. Chloe, facing charges of conspiracy and fraud, deleted her social media and disappeared from public view. The perfect facade of the Vance family had not just cracked, it had crumbled into dust. Liam began leaving me frantic, rambling voicemails. He swung wildly between rage and pathetic pleading. "You've ruined me, Alara. My life is over," he'd scream. Hours later, he'd call back, sobbing. "I'm so sorry. I never knew how far she would go. I was trapped." I listened to one of these messages and felt nothing but a profound, empty pity. He wasn't trapped, he was complicit. He had stood by and watched as his mother systematically dismantled my life, my sanity, my health. His only regret was getting caught. I deleted the messages and blocked his number. His apologies were just another form of manipulation, and I was done being manipulated. With the evidence I provided, along with Sarah Chen's investigation, the DA's office moved swiftly. Beatrice was located in a neighboring state, hiding out at a remote wellness spa. She was formally indicted on multiple charges, including aggravated assault for the poisoning, medical fraud, and conspiracy. The judge, citing the wealth and influence of the Vance family, denied bail. The image of Beatrice Vance, the elegant matriarch, being led away in handcuffs was a quiet, definitive end to her reign. Anya filed my civil suit. We sought not only a divorce, but an annulment of our prenuptial agreement on the grounds of fraud and coercion, presenting the falsified medical file as proof of a long-term plan of manipulation. We asked for damages for the emotional and physical harm I had endured. The court, in a preliminary hearing, froze all of Liam and Beatrice's joint assets. The grand house on the Oakline Street, their family beach estate, their carefully curated portfolios, all of it was locked away pending the outcome of the case. I hadn't just survived, I had, with the quiet precision they had so underestimated, taken everything. In the weeks that followed, other women came forward. Sarah Chen's article had opened a floodgate. There was a woman whose ex-husband had gained full custody of their children after she was suddenly diagnosed with a personality disorder by a consulting physician named Beatrice Vance. There was another whose inheritance had been signed over to her brother while she was in a medically induced state of confusion at a private clinic where Beatrice had connections. Our stories, unique in their painful details, were identical in their pattern. We were a sisterhood I never asked to join, our bond forged in the shared trauma of being told we were crazy when, in fact, we were being systematically abused. I returned to my house, our house, which the court had granted me sole possession of. It felt strange and vast without Liam's presence, without the oppressive weight of the Vance legacy. The air was still, but it was a peaceful stillness now, not a suffocating one. I walked through the rooms, a stranger in my own life, and began the slow, deliberate process of reclaiming it. I boxed up all of Liam's belongings. I took down the formal family portraits. I hired painters and had the dark, heavy colors of Beatrice's choosing painted over with shades of cream, sage, and pale blue. I opened every window, letting the fresh, misty air chase out the stale scent of deceit. I went into my art studio, which felt like the only room that had ever truly been mine, and I picked up a brush. I painted for hours, not thinking, just feeling, letting the colors bleed across the paper, deep, stormy blues and grays giving way to soft, hopeful pinks and golds. My mother came over and helped me plant a garden in the backyard where Beatrice's pristine, joyless rose bushes had been. We dug our hands into the rich, dark earth, planting lavender and chamomile, herbs for healing and peace. As we worked under the gentle sun, she looked at me, her eyes full of a love that was fierce and unwavering. "I am so sorry I didn't see it sooner, Alara," she said, her voice quiet. "But I have never been more proud of the woman you have become." Tears welled in my eyes, but they were not tears of grief. They were tears of release. We had found our way back to each other, our bond stronger than ever. One evening, I received a letter. The envelope was plain, the handwriting delicate and familiar. It was from Maya, Liam's sister. It contained a single line, "Thank you for showing me that strength doesn't have to shout." I folded the note and placed it in a small wooden box with my most precious things. The revenge was complete. The Vances were ruined, their name a synonym for scandal. But I found that the victory was not in their downfall, but in my own quiet resurrection. The goal had never been to destroy them, but to reclaim myself. It wasn't about vengeance, it was about truth. My life is quiet again, but it is a different kind of quiet. It is not the silence of fear, but the serenity of peace. It is the gentle melody of a life played in a major key, a harmony I am composing myself, one brushstroke, one sunrise, one peaceful breath at a time. The world they tried to take from me, I have rebuilt. And it is more beautiful than anything they could have ever imagined, because this time, it is entirely, unshakably my own.